The smile on my father's face was frozen, a grotesque mask of pride that had just shattered. His eyes were wide, the laugh stuck in his throat. Then we heard the voice, crisp with authority. "Wait. This belongs to your daughter?" My father, Robert, a retired Army colonel and a man who worships rank above all else, had just been publicly floored by a 4-star general. He was still smiling, you see, but he wasn't laughing anymore. He looked like a man who just realized the ground beneath him wasn't there. It had all started just 20 minutes earlier on the tarmac of a secure airbase. This was the annual Defense Innovation Showcase, a high-stakes event, and I was standing beside my prototype, a sleek, matte black experimental jet. I was in my tailored dark gray flight suit, running final checks. My father, Robert, was there as my +1. To him, I was still his great disappointment. The failed West Point candidate, the daughter who chose computers over what he called a real career. He was working the crowd, slapping backs, acting as if he were the host. Then, the real, very important person arrived. General Hayes, the man holding the $4.2 billion purse strings for Air Mobility Command's modernization. The man I had to impress. My father immediately intercepted him, physically stepping in front of me before I could even open my mouth. "General, great to see you. Robert Jensen, 06, retired." He clapped the general on the shoulder with a familiarity he hadn't earned. General Hayes nodded politely, his eyes glancing past my father to me. "And this is?" My father chuckled, that dismissive, patronizing little sound I'd known my whole life. "Oh, this is my daughter, Anna. She handles the IT for the company." He gestured to the billion-dollar aircraft behind me. "You know, makes the PowerPoints run." He then leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, as if sharing a joke between two important men. "Just ignore her, General. She's just here to make sure the monitors work." I just stood there. My hands didn't clench. My expression didn't change, but inside a cold, precise fury settled over me. The AV Club. He had just reduced the CEO and chief architect of the entire Project Blackwing platform to the AV Club. It wasn't just the familiar sting of being belittled, the same old story from every Christmas and Thanksgiving, where my accomplishments were just nice hobbies next to my cousin's military promotions. This was different. He'd done it in front of the primary client. He'd done it in my world, on my stage. General Hayes gave me that polite, dismissive nod, the kind you give the help, and turned his full attention back to my father. He had no idea he'd just insulted the only person on that entire tarmac with the biometric clearance to open the cabin door. He had no idea he was talking to the wrong Jensen. To understand the reckoning that was about to take place at 40,000 feet, you have to understand the man he thought I was, and the woman I actually am. My father, Robert, has 2 settings, commanding officer and proud patriarch. But his pride was always aimed at someone else. I remember this one Thanksgiving, the whole family was there and he was holding court by the fireplace, whiskey glass in hand. He was beaming at my cousin Mark, a man who had just been promoted to major in the Army. "Now that," my father boomed, raising his glass to the room, "is a real career. Responsibility, leading men, making a tangible difference in the world." Everyone nodded and clapped, and Mark, he just soaked it all in. That was his role, to be the one my father was proud of. Later that evening, I tried to connect. I tried to share my own news. I mentioned quietly that my company had just closed its Series C funding round. It was a massive validation, a $90 million vote of confidence from the most ruthless investors in the world. My father he patted my hand. That same, patronizing, dismissive little pat he'd given me since I was a child. "That's nice, dear. More spreadsheets, right? Good for you." He then turned back to the room and chuckled, calling out, "That's my Annie code for you. Always busy with her little startup." My little startup girl. I was 34 years old, managing a 70-person team of the best aerospace engineers in the country, but to him, I was still a kid playing on a computer. This was the same man who, when I got my acceptance to MIT, told me it was a good backup, just in case I didn't get into West Point. I didn't get into West Point, so In his eyes, my entire life since then had been one long consolation prize. My successes weren't real, they were just footnotes. They were hobbies. They weren't leading men. The irony is that his world of real careers was the one I was secretly propping up. While he was bragging about Mark's promotion at a barbecue, my little startup wasn't just handling IT or making spreadsheets. I was in places he couldn't even imagine, places his security clearance, even when he was active, would never have touched. My reality wasn't a Silicon Valley campus with beanbags. It was a sterile, windowless room called a SCIF, a sensitive compartmented information facility. I wasn't pitching to venture capitalists. I was briefing grim-faced officials from the Defense Intelligence Agency. These were men and women who didn't smile, and whose opinions were written in multi-billion-dollar contracts, not polite applause at a family dinner. I'd stand in that silent, secure room, the glow of my data on the massive screen. The Blackwing platform isn't just fast, I'd explain, my voice steady. It provides a sustainable, 72-hour loiter time for SIGINT collection in non-permissive environments. I'd point to the thermal imaging data. The reduced thermal signature is unlike anything you've ever seen. It's fully mil-spec compliant, but it's built on a rapid prototyping framework. We can adapt to new threats in weeks, not years. This wasn't about spreadsheets. This was about giving our operators an unfair advantage. This was about saving lives. Before the showcase, I was in a final review with my head of ops, Sarah. Sarah is a no-nonsense former Air Force logistics chief who eats retired colonels for breakfast. She doesn't have time for ego, only for results. She looked at the final flight plan, at the demo parameters, and just nodded, her expression hard. General Hayes isn't coming to see a jet, Anna, she said, her voice flat. He's coming to see the jet. The one that actually meets the alpha level requirement. He's tired of excuses from the big contractors. Don't let your father screw this up. She was right. This wasn't about finally getting my dad's approval. This was about the survival of my company. And more importantly, the survival of the people who would one day fly my tech. My father measured success in polished brass and loud salutes. My world? It was measured in microns, in terabytes, and in the quiet, agonizing calculus of lives saved. He thought my hobby was cute. He had no idea that his little startup girl was about to solve the Pentagon's biggest operational problem. He had no idea that the monitors I made work were the only thing standing between mission failure and getting our people home. For years, I had let him have his narrative. I built my legacy in silence. But on that tarmac, he hadn't just insulted me. He'd insulted my company, my team, and he had disrespected a 4-star's time. I decided, in that moment of cold fury, that I was done trying to speak his language. I would finally speak to him in the only language he understood, protocol. As I stood there on the hot tarmac, watching my father hold court with General Hayes, something inside me, it didn't break. It hardened. The familiar, dull ache of being invisible was replaced by a sudden, cold clarity. This was no longer a family outing. This was a critical systems test, and my father, with his patronizing jokes about PowerPoints, was a high-risk variable. He was a liability. The goal was no longer to win his approval, a phantom I'd been chasing my whole life. The goal was to demonstrate my authority, full stop. I had to protect my work, my team, and this multi-billion-dollar opportunity. This wasn't some casual showcase. This was a formal military evaluation, and formal evaluations. They have rules. They have protocols. My father, a man who lived and breathed military hierarchy, was about to get a lesson in it. He assumed he was an honored guest, a retired colonel here to consult and reminisce. He had absolutely no idea that I was the demonstration. He thought he was here to watch the show. He didn't realize I was the entire show. I took a steadying breath and stepped forward, interrupting them with a calm professional smile. General, if you'll excuse me for one moment, I need to confirm our flight manifest with the coordinator. I walked away from their conversation, my boots hitting the pavement with purpose. I found the event's manifest coordinator, a no-nonsense master sergeant. Ma'am, I said, I'm Anna Jensen, lead for Project Blackwing. I need to update my demo team's access list for General Hayes's brief. She didn't blink, just nodded me toward a secure DoD portal, the Defense Innovation Unit's official login. This was my turf. My fingers moved quickly, the interface familiar. I brought up the access list for the Blackwing demonstration, just 3 names. I typed. Demo lead, Chief Pilot, Anna Jensen. Access, unrestricted. Logistics lead, Sarah Cole. Access, granted. Then, I got to my father's name. I paused just for a second, thinking of all the times he'd called me Annie Code. Guest, Robert Jensen. Colonel, Rhett. Access, escort required. Non-essential. A simple keystroke that defined his exact and accurate position in my world. I stepped away from the terminal and pulled out my phone, sending a quick encrypted text to my ops lead, Sarah. Is the General's brief locked? The reply was instant. Locked. He's not here for the also-rans. He's cleared to know everything. The airframe, the drive, the whole Alpha Protocol package. It's your show, boss. It's your show, boss. The access lists were filed. The protocols were set. My father, obsessed with status, had no idea that on a military base, the only thing that matters is the name on the manifest. He thought he was coming to my show and tell. He was about to find out he was a guest at my command performance. We were back on the tarmac. My father, Robert, had just delivered his punchline. Just ignore her, General. She's just here to make sure the monitors work. He was still chuckling, so proud of his little joke. General Hayes gave me that polite, dismissive nod, the kind of look I'd been getting my whole life. My father had just erased me in front of the single most important client of my career. I felt that old, familiar coldness. But this time, it was different. It wasn't sadness. It was fuel. I said nothing. I didn't correct him. I didn't defend myself. I just turned my back to them and walked to the jet. I stepped up to the entry panel, my father's laughter still hanging in the air. I paused for a single beat, then looked right at him, at his smug, proud face. Then, I looked at the General. And I placed my palm flat against the biometric scanner. There was a sharp, high-pitched chirp, followed by the heavy hiss of a pressurized hatch sliding open. The sound cut right through my father's story. The laughing stopped. General Hayes, a man who lives in a world of protocol and access, stopped. His eyes, which had glazed over with polite dismissal, were suddenly sharp. He was watching me. My father, oblivious as ever, just clapped his hands. Very fancy, Annie. Looks expensive. This way, General, I said, my voice perfectly even. I led them up the stairs. The moment they stepped inside, the atmosphere changed. This wasn't the plush leather and mahogany cabin of a corporate jet my father was used to. It was a state-of-the-art mobile command center. Banks of cooled servers hummed quietly. Advanced composite materials were everywhere. And just ahead, visible through a reinforced partition, was a hyper-advanced, 2-seat cockpit that looked like it was pulled from a science fiction film. General Hayes let out a low whistle. He was no longer looking at my father. He was looking at the hardware. He ran a hand over the console. This is a hell of a platform, Miss Jensen. His voice was different now. The dismissal was gone, replaced by genuine awe. Your team has done the impossible. The integration here is seamless. He moved toward the cockpit, his eyes scanning every instrument. Who's your lead test pilot? I want to meet the man who tamed this thing. He must be one of the best. My father, seeing his moment to reinsert himself, stepped forward, beaming. Oh, my daughter just owns the company, General. He waved his hand dismissively as if swatting away the very idea of my competence. She just hires the real experts for that part of it. Isn't that right, Annie? I was standing in the cockpit, one hand resting on the flight yoke. I turned to face them both. My father, with his proud, ignorant smile. The General, with his genuine professional question. I looked past my father and spoke directly to General Hayes. The man you're looking for, General, is me. I tapped a single button on the main console. The primary flight display lit up, not with navigation data, but with my credentials. My name, my photo, my certifications. I'm the lead pilot. I have over 5,000 hours in experimental airframes, and this, I patted the console, the machine I had bled for. This is my design. General Hayes's eyes went wide. He stared at the screen, then at me. He looked past me, at the official FAA bulkhead plaque. His eyes scanned the text, designed and built by Jensen Aerospace, a Jensen chief architect. He looked at my gray flight suit, truly seeing the custom project patches on the shoulder for the first time. The puzzle pieces clicked into place, live, right in front of my father. "Wait," the general said, his voice dropping in dawning realization. "This belongs to your daughter?" He looked at my father, then back at me. "You're Anna Jensen, the one who wrote the white paper on low observable airframes, the Blackwing theory paper?" And there it was, my father's smile. It didn't just fade. It froze. It cracked. The blood drained from his face as he looked from the 4-star general to me and back again. He saw the general, a man he idolized, looking at him with pure, unfiltered annoyance. Then General Hayes did something my father had never done. He snapped to a posture of crisp, professional respect. He wasn't talking to a colonel's it girl anymore. "Ms. Jensen," he said, his voice firm. "My apologies. I was not aware I was speaking to the chief architect. Your work is revolutionary." My father had spent my entire life teaching me to respect the uniform. But in that moment, the 4-star general was showing deference to my flight suit. And my father, he just stood there, speechless, in a cockpit he wasn't cleared to be in. I held General Hayes's gaze for a moment, a silent acknowledgement of the professionalism that had just been established. Then I looked past him to my father. Robert's face was a mask of utter confusion and shame. The smugness was gone, replaced by the bewildered look of a man who had just walked into the wrong room and been told he didn't belong. My voice wasn't angry. It wasn't triumphant. It was just firm, authoritative. "Dad," I said, keeping my tone level, "General Hayes and I have a classified pre-to-flight brief to conduct. You'll need to wait outside on the tarmac with the other guests." He opened his mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to make another joke, but no sound came out. He looked at the general, hoping for an ally, but Hayes was already studying my console, his focus entirely on the mission. The moment of paternal authority was gone. A young airman, sensing the shift, gently touched my father's elbow. "Sir? This way, please." I watched him, the retired colonel, the man who demanded respect, get quietly escorted out of my cockpit like a lost tourist. He walked down the air stairs, alone. I saw him stop on the hot tarmac, a small, solitary figure. Watching as his IT girl, turned back to the 4-star general and began my real work. As soon as the hatch hissed shut, General Hayes's entire demeanor shifted back to business. He was all focus, all intensity. He tapped the console. "Now, Ms. Jensen," he said, his voice all business, "tell me about the SIGINT package. We're very interested in the real-world application of your alpha build." And just like that, the family drama evaporated. I had won. I wasn't Annie Code. I was Miss Jensen, the chief architect. I took a breath, centered myself, and began the brief. "As you'll see from the data, General, the alpha build's primary advantage is its low probability of intercept." 1 year later, I wasn't on a tarmac anymore. I was standing at the head of a massive, polished mahogany table deep inside the Pentagon. The room was intimidating, filled with generals and duty officials, a sea of decorated uniforms and stern faces. But I wasn't the +1. I wasn't the IT support. I was the one running the meeting. My little startup had just been awarded the $4.2 billion Project Blackwing Phase 2 contract. I was briefing them on the next stage of development, and they were all just listening. General Hayes was at the far end of the table. He's the one who'd opened the meeting. He had become my greatest champion within the DoD, a mentor who saw my competence, not my gender or my family name. "This is Anna Jensen," he'd said to the room, his voice carrying that familiar, crisp authority. "For those of you who don't know, she's not just a CEO, she's one of the sharpest aeronautical minds we have. Her tech, he nodded at me, is already in the field, and it is already saving lives. Listen to her. In that moment, surrounded by those professionals, I realized something. This was my family. Not a family of obligation or blood or shared history, but one of mutual respect, a family built on competence. That evening, I was in my actual office, a large space with a window, overlooking the skyline, sketching out a new propulsion concept. My phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced at it. The contact name was just Dad. I hadn't changed it. I opened the message, my curiosity clinical, detached. The text read, "Annie, your cousin Mark is transitioning out of the army. He's looking for a job." I felt a small, tired smile touch my lips. Mark? The real career. The major. The man my father had toasted at Thanksgiving. The text continued. I was wondering if, maybe, you had an opening in IT? The irony was so thick I could almost taste it. He was asking me, the spreadsheet girl, to give his golden boy an IT job. The same belittling word he'd used on the tarmac. He was trying to use my world, the one he'd mocked, to save the one he'd worshipped. And as I read that message, I waited for the anger. I waited for the familiar sting, the desire to write back and list every single injustice, every forgotten birthday, every dismissed achievement. But nothing came. I didn't feel anger. I didn't even feel triumph. I just felt distance. A calm, quiet, echoing distance. My peace was no longer tethered to his apology. My validation was no longer his to give or withhold. He was just a man on a phone. A man from a different life. I looked at the text one last time. Then, I archived the message without replying. I turned my phone face down and returned to my blueprints. I had work to do. My father spent his whole life collecting brass, but he never understood that. True authority isn't about the rank you wear, it's about the future you build. And my future was cleared for takeoff. In a world full of people who want to put you in a box, how did you prove you were the one who owned the building? Share your story in the comments. In this community, we know what you're worth.